Good day, everybody, and welcome to the professors here at McMurray University in Abilene, Texas. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier.
And we're delighted to have you join in on today's show. Today we're going in a different direction, a direction we've never been before on this podcast. This is exciting. You're looking at me like, what's so exciting
How's this
about
different?
this?
It's just Joe.
It's just Joe.
That's nice.
Joe Specht.
It is Joe Specht, and he is
Texas music historian.
one of the world's leading experts on Texas music.
Yeah.
I like to think of myself as just a librarian.
Yeah, well, that's way too minimalistic on your part.
It sure is. Now, we need to say that a university is made up of all sorts of different people. And so there's the professors who teach, the students, and that's who you think about. Then there's the administrators, there's the staff people.
Yeah.
And every college has a library. And Joe Specht was McMurray's librarian for how many years?
32 years.
Wow.
That's amazing. Almost as long as I've been alive. Why is everybody laughing? I don't know.
I can't speak to your sentience.
Okay. But anyway, but Joe had a dark passion in addition to being a
A
librarian.
dark passion. How is it dark?
He's interested in music, Texas music. Right?
Right, yes. Yeah.
I don't know why it's dark. I
It's
just
just-
said that
a
just
dark
to make
passion.
this.
I really didn't know where you're.
Well, we're going. But anyway, we're going to Texas music.
Okay.
So, Joe, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And we're curious, where did you get interested in Texas music history?
Well, when you're born in Marlin, Texas, live in Longview, Denton, Lubbock, and Abilene, there's music all around you. And growing up in the 50s, Elvis, rock and roll had just hit, broken out. Buddy Holly,
Yeah.
Roy Orbison, Texans. We could just go on and on in terms of the rock and roll folks. And country music was right there on the radio. African-American music, Jimmy Reed, although he wasn't from Texas, was really popular at the time, late 50s, early 60s. So there was just all sorts of music around. And being a Texan, I just gravitated to the folks that produced it from the Lone Star State.
Were you ever interested in being a musician? I mean, do you have this history?
Well, I played a clarinet in junior high and high school.
I thought you said musician. I'm
And-
sorry. He said clarinet.
And, yeah, that's really not. It got me one girl, but other than that, if I could just had a fiddle or a guitar.
Did you mesmerize her like a snake charmer?
Well, they call it the licorice stick, the clarinet. But
what that means.
There's
And
a
I'm not
question,
sure.
do we go down that alley
Here we
or
go.
not? No.
There's the dark
we're
passion.
not.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not.
We're learning more about
I'm
this
not
guy.
going to mention my reed or anything. So
That's- yeah.
Okay, good. We appreciate
And
that.
we can edit all this out, of course.
Yeah, of course. Don't touch it. Don't
Now this
touch
is where
at
it all stays. Yeah.
So, and as we were talking earlier, Texas music is unique in its own right. It's the cultures, the various cultures, Czech, German, Anglo, African-American, Tejano, all converged here in our state. You combine that with the various geographies, south, west, border, and so on and so forth, and it provided a background for some unique music. And of course, Texans being as chauvinistic as they are, we usually say that our state has the best music in terms of the variety and that sort of thing. But Louisiana, Oklahoma, California, they have musical heritages that match Texas as well. We were talking about Nebraska.
Yeah, what kind of musical heritage do they have?
Tom Paul and the Glazer brothers came from Nebraska. That's about the only thing I know about their music.
Can you think of anybody else from
I was
Nebraska?
about to say, I was trying to go through my Iowa music catalog, and it just didn't really resonate.
And it's interesting, too, the country
They didn't have a fife. You wouldn't know.
Didn't have a fifer drum. You're right. They weren't marching off the battle.
the Country Music Hall of Fame just opened a new exhibit last week. It'll be up for 3 years, and it's called Outlaws and Armadillos. And you might figure out that it has something to do with the Nashville-Austin connection in the 1970s. So once again, Texas played a prominent role in the development of country music during the 70s, as well as other forms of music as well. And over the years, I've written a variety of articles, a few little books and that sort of thing on Texas music that touch on various forms. And so perhaps today we can kind of look at some of those things and the types of music that I dealt with in those particular publications.
Well, how did you make the transition from being obviously a fan of music to being a historian? I mean, that's an interesting trek that many people don't make.
Yeah.
Well, I have an MLS, Master of Library Science, from North Texas, but I also have a Master MA in History from North Texas. And so, I was just interested in history. When I started buying records, my first album was the Buddy Holly Story and the Everly Brothers songs, Our Daddy Taught Us, mainly LPs. But
And that was when?
That would have been 1959, 60.
Okay.
I knew that if I started buying 78s, the old 78 RPMs, it was going to be never ending. So I've limited my collection primarily to 45s and vinyl primarily. But of course, by the early 90s, record companies decided that nobody was interested in vinyl anymore, and so they basically phased it out, and compact discs came into play. And so I've got several thousand compact discs now, and of course now they've decided that they need to be phasing compact disc out, and we need to go to wave and
streaming
and
Yeah,
all of
streaming
that,
stuff.
And being a librarian, I want something that's hard copy, that has notes to it. It tells me who the musicians are and that sort of thing. So I don't know what I'm going to do, about keeping up with current trends if we don't have compact disc, at least.
But isn't vinyl coming back?
Vinyl is coming back in a big way. It's interesting.
Why?
You can buy, well,
Sound quality.
yeah, and that's the one thing that people are a little confused about. They think that if you buy a vinyl record today, say a new Neil Young album that just came out, that it's going to be analog, because that was the difference, analog versus digital. Mm-hmm. The analog had a sound that wasn't as harsh, and it just had a flow to it that digital didn't. Well, unless you're a Jack White or somebody who has his own tubes and the whole bit to record analog, the new Neil Young album is recorded digitally. So you're buying a vinyl copy that's digital.
So
It's not going to sound any different than the compact disc. But there's just something about having a cover, 12 by 12 or whatever, that you can hold, you can open up, and you can read, that sort of thing. So as far as the sound, unless they're actually recording in analog, it's not going to be any different than the compact disc.
What do you prefer to listen to? If
I
you
like-
could listen to anything.
I like to listen to the vinyl.
To the vinyl.
Yeah, and I've
The
got,
analog or the digital?
well, the new stuff I've had to, it's digital, obviously.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of decide, for example, Sonic Youth is, they broke up a few years ago because Thurston Moore was running around on his wife, Kim Gordon, who was in the band, so they broke up.
Is he a clarinet player?
No, but he probably could play clarinet. But early on, I decided I was just going to stick with vinyl for them. And throughout the 90s and the 21st century, they've issued vinyl as well as compact disc. Willie, there's a break in the 90s when it was all compact disc.
Okay, you're talking Willie
Willie
Nelson? Okay.
But his new albums are being reissued, issued on vinyl as well. So I'm picking Willie back up on vinyl. So there's some performers I have all vinyl. Others, it's a combination. And of course, if they started recording after 1990, many times it's just compact disc. But there's really nothing like quite putting a platter, on the turntable, turning it on, sitting back, and that's just the way I grew up listening to music.
So this implies that you have a turntable then?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Is yours like an original from the 1950s, or do you have?
Well, my is a Girard turntable that I bought in 1969 when I was in Germany. I was in the Army, drafted, didn't have the opportunity to go to Vietnam, went to Germany instead. Shucks.
Yeah, sounds so disappointed.
And so one of the things that everybody was doing was buying equipment and sending it back to the States. So I have a Girard turntable. I'm not going to remember what kind of amp I have, and 2 speakers. And this was back when the speakers
Were huge.
were like this big. And so I didn't buy a tape deck. A tape deck at that time meant reel to reel.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I shipped those back, and that's the music that I'm.
And it still works today.
It still works today. I've been through 3.
Made in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, through 3 CD players.
But you still have the original
Yeah.
turntable.
I still have my original Buddy Holly album, my original Everly Brothers album.
Okay.
And
we're going to have to stop you, unfortunately, for a
has
second.
it been
because
11 minutes?
It has. We'll be back.
Bear Leader Tours. Where will Bear Leader Tours take you? Everywhere. Paris. Bruges. Trier. Battlefields. Pearl Harbor. Pacific Beaches. New Orleans. Join the adventure.
www.mcwhinney.org.
This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back, and this is Paul Fabrizio of the Professors with...
I'm Don Frazier, and we're visiting with Joe Specht, one of our favorite folks, and an expert on Texas Texas music history.
That's right. And, of course, over there is Scott the engineer.
He had some interesting insights on the LPs and the vinyl that we were talking about during the break. What were you saying about the original?
Well, and I don't want to step on Joe's toes or anything, but that's
Ouch.
what the sound that you got from a lot of those older original vinyls. A lot of people don't realize that was just 4-track recordings, so it's a totally different sound than when the 8-track came in. And now they're recording up to 16 channels and
More than that, I think.
yeah, and beyond now. So it's a totally unique sound, that 4-track sound. I think it's more pure of what the original music's supposed to sound like. It's what it was intended to sound like, I think.
I would agree, and they weren't even splicing back then.
Exactly.
And you couldn't help the pitch of singers. Some of these in the country field in particular, they're engineered to sound a lot better than they really are. And
the gate will keep you on tune. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
What's that mean?
It's actually a deal that's sitting over there in their rack, and man, you get off key and it fixes you.
Really?
Yeah.
And
So can you fix our voices here?
No.
Well, I
We're
speak for
always
me.
on pitch, brother.
Yeah. Lost cause. No,
Lost cause, okay.
Yeah.
That's good
So
to know.
I don't know if it does. Just talking if it'll fix you, but if you get off pitch, it will actually.
And so
tweak
that
you.
would make a live performance a lot different than a recorded performance.
and some of them use their own voice tracks. They're just mouthing
Exactly.
Oh, they're not even singing at the concerts.
because they can't replicate it, and that's just the voice. Some of the, like Sgt. Pepper we were talking about, the Beatles album, groundbreaking album, A Day in the Life, the last song on the album.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that buildup of noise?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you couldn't do that live in concert. So a lot of the music moved into the studio. Steely Dan, those sort of groups, and created their own sound in the studio. For me, I liked it better when everybody was there in the studio at the same time. Since the 80s, at least, a lot of times somebody will go in and lay down the bass track,
Exactly.
and nobody else is there. And then Willie, he calls in his vocals from Maui. He'll have all the instruments.
What's he doing in Maui?
He has a home in Maui.
Oh, does he?
Also,
Maui.
Yeah, Spicewood, but so he's listening to what the instrumentation that's already been laid down, and just singing right over it.
Wow.
In the old days, they were all there, and of course they did multiple takes. Even in the older days, back when you were literally using a wax disc, and you had a heavy tone arm with a needle, and you were literally cutting the grooves in the wax.
As they were doing.
2 takes was about as most as you would get. Really, only 1 for the most part. So, you really had to be on. That's when you were recording with musicians you were familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Need more cowbell.
Yeah. So now they'll say, well, we've got to get so and so for this guitar part, so and so for the drums. They've never even played with this guy before.
Wow.
And they don't need to play with them before because it's all going to be engineered.
Yes, right.
So take us back. Who was the first real Texas musician?
Well, I think you'd probably have to go back to the blues. Or we could go back to ragtime. Scott Joplin.
1920s.
Well,
From Texarkana?
yeah, that would be the turn of the century.
Okay.
1900 and so on, when ragtime was coming in. Eck Robertson, a fiddler from Amarillo, is credited 1921-22 with being perhaps the first to actually record country music. And it was just
Really?
two fiddle tunes, and they recorded them in New York City in the Victor Studios. They showed up, he and I'm not going to remember his sidekick, showed up. They had been to a Confederate reunion in Virginia, and they showed up in dress. In
Confederate uniform.
In reunion garb. So
Yeah.
they were Confederate veterans, I'm assuming?
Yes,
Okay.
and so they just popped in and introduced themselves and recorded these 2 fiddle tunes. Fiddling John Carson, who was in Atlanta at the time, also recorded the Old Crackling Hen or something about that. It's almost like listening to a foreign language because he was from Georgia and he had an accent and so on. And his record was actually released before Eck Robertson. But historians understand that it was a Texan who probably cut the first country music disc. Blind Lemon Jefferson, 1926. From Couchman, Mahia in that area, just east of Waco, was responsible for recording what we call the country blues. Just you and your guitar.
Was Leadbelly a Texan?
Well, he was born Caddo Lake on the Louisiana side.
Ah, okay, so
But-
close.
So
Yeah, but he spent time in Texas. He even was a cowboy of sorts in Denton County,
Okay.
working with cows and that sort of thing. So Texas claims him.
Okay.
We claim a lot of people that came to Texas later, and we claim a lot of folks who were born in Texas and left Texas fairly early as well.
Sure.
So But
So as long as they drove through here at some point, they're Texan. Is that you?
that's not the way I do it. No, they have to have a real tie to the state musically for me to consider them. Like Buck Owens, for example, was born in Sherman, but I think he moved when he was around 3. He's kind of borderline for me.
Yeah. On a number of levels.
Yeah, well, Gene Autry, for example, was born
cool.
in Aubrey or somewhere around in the Metroplex in a small town, and he was in 12 or 13 before he moved to Oklahoma. So his musical roots were already being formed.
Okay.
Oklahoma certainly claims him, and Texas certainly has a right to as well.
I mean, I wish Texas could claim Hank Williams.
Well, yeah, and Jimmy Rogers, the Blue Yodeler.
Yeah.
We sort of claim him in a way because he moved to Kerrville because of his tuberculosis.
Huh.
Even though he died in the Victor studio or in New York City after his last session, he was living in Texas the last years of his life. Alan Lomax, the son of John Lomax,
the collector.
yes, even described him as the Texas Railroad Man in one book. So Lomax was under the impression that Jimmy Rogers was from Texas as well.
He influenced a lot of Texas artists too.
Oh, he did. He did. The Blue Yodel #1, T for Texas, T for Tennessee, T for Thelma, that gal that made a wreck out of me. And, of course, that brings back that Louisiana and Texas connection.
Yeah.
Dr. Frazier, certainly better than me, could talk about GTT. That was on...
What's GTT?
Gone to Texas.
Oh,
So, I mean, after the Civil War, everything else is a wreck, but
Not
Texas is
Texas.
still intact. So, carve GTT into the doorpost and
off
hi
you go.
ya, head west.
Oh, okay.
Right. And, of course, the Texas connection in music. For example, Bob Wills added drums when no one else was doing it in country music, the Western swing formula. His first performance on the Opry in 1944, supposedly they made him put his drummer behind the curtains. Because
they didn't want anybody to hear it.
drums were not allowed on the Opry.
Okay, we're going to have to stop right there, Joe. Hang on. We'll be back.
When you support McWhinney History Education Group, you also support the many young workers who operate and maintain the company's digital operations. These are dedicated university students who handle many things such as filming, recording, and editing content for McWhinney, as well as cultivate the layout and structure of McWhinney's various websites, including its associated channel on YouTube. We are a nonprofit organization that exists from donations from interested persons and history enthusiasts alike. Donations enable our students to obtain a higher education, job training, and career bolstering skills. If you would like to donate, please visit us at www.mcwhinney.org and click on our About Us tab to learn more.
This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back, and this is Paul Fabrizio, the Professors, with my friend.
I'm Don Frazier, and we're here visiting with Joe Specht.
Yes, and we're talking about Texas music history with a genuine Texas music historian. Of course, on the other side, holding up books soon, is our Vanna White for today, and that's Scott the engineer. Now,
I used to like you, but now I don't know. Now I'm Vanna.
Now, Joe Specht, you have been studying Texas music for half a century. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I've been buying Texas music.
Okay, well, good enough.
Since that time, yeah.
And one of the things is that you have written about your works in many different publications, and you've also written a couple books. And one of them is about a specific city in Abilene, our home.
It is. And it's called, the first edition was called The Women There Don't Treat You Mean, Abilene in Song, published by State House Press. And it sold close to 1,500 copies over a couple of 3 years, and was out of print for 10 years. The nice thing about this little book is it had a CD that came with it in the back, 6 songs as sung by performers from Abilene. And they were all Abilene-related songs, including, of course, Abilene, the song made famous by George Hamilton IV, which was written by Bob Gibson and Lester Brown. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, neither one of these men knew if the song they were writing about was about the town in Kansas or the town in Texas.
So they didn't know. Had they ever visited either of the two
No,
Abilenes?
neither one of them had visited Abilene, Kansas or Abilene, Texas. That is until Bob Gibson came to the Kerrville Folk Festival in 1978. And he said that when he started singing the song, and 5,000 Texans stood up and put their hands and hats over their heart, he knew then that he had written it about Abilene, Texas. So in our little book, that is the only song that has ambiguity. In other words, it could be Kansas, it could be Texas, although most people, Kansas has really slipped off the map, Abilene, Kansas.
Sure.
And so most people nowadays think of Abilene, the George Hamilton IV song, which has been recorded by over 100 people.
Really?
And there's a whole website devoted to Abilene, the song.
It's amazing how many times when I introduce myself as being from Abilene, somebody will say, yeah, the women there don't treat you mean in Abilene.
Exactly.
I said,
The prettiest town I've ever seen,
Yeah.
and so on. But all the other songs in our little book were, I identified them specifically. These were songs written about or had something to do with Abilene, Texas.
There's that many songs that have anything to do with Abilene, Texas?
There is. The new edition of our book that came out in 2017, Glenn Dromgoole, the publisher, Texas Star Trading Company, felt like it would be more appropriate to switch the title. So now it's Abilene in Song, The Women There Don't Treat You Mean. And this is an enlarged edition of the 2006 State House Press book, and there are over 100 Abilene-related songs that I discuss in this book. Then we have an honorable mention section that has another probably 30. Honorable mention means it would be something like All My Exes Live in Texas.
Yeah.
There's Abilene from...
Well, Sweet Irene and Abilene.
Right,
something like that.
exactly. So that's just a mention. All the other...
You were surprised I could come up with that lyric.
Little
weren't you?
Jorge right there. You got it.
But all of the other chapters and songs in our revised edition are songs where Abilene, Texas plays a key role. And it's really really interesting. I just have been corresponding with Matty Freiberg in Stockholm, Sweden. He's actually coming to Texas this week. He's going to be at the Snyder's Western Swing Festival, and he's coming through town on Friday, and we're going to meet. I had sent him a copy of the revised edition of Abilene in Song, which he's reviewed for a Swedish music magazine. So he's bringing me a copy of the magazine. I said, could you loosely translate your review in English too, which he's going to do. But in the meantime, he said, he sent me an email and said, I was ironing my shirts and iron my own shirts too. Our wives are just liberated. And he was listening to Red Simpson, who recorded a lot of trucker songs. And there is a song on his third album, and I'm not going to be able to remember the name of the song right now, but it's all about Abilene, Texas.
What?
I'm going home to Mama in Abilene. And I thought, well, wait a minute, is this Kansas or Texas? And then later, he sings about his mother having a heart as big as Texas. Got to be Abilene, Texas. So this is an example. I've already got a box, and I'm throwing things in it. More songs about Abilene, Texas.
Stuff I missed.
That are going to be in the third edition. Surely there'll be a third edition in another 10 years.
Why do so many people write about Abilene?
It's very interesting. It rhymes.
Yeah, I was about to say because it rhymes.
But
no other cities rhyme?
Not as easily.
I mean, think about it. I mean, what do you rhyme with Fort Worth?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Case in
Yeah.
point. Bakersfield.
That's why it's Big Ball in Cowtown and not Big Ball in
Fort Worth.
Yeah. But one of the things.
Okay, I mean.
Yeah, one of the things we discovered in the first edition, and it only became more apparent in the second edition, is women songwriters who have never been to Abilene use it as a subject for their songs. There's a romance about Abilene, West Texas. For some of these women songwriters, it's a place to escape to. There's been domestic violence, and they're getting away, and they're coming to Abilene. For others, they're meeting someone in Abilene.
Because it's on Interstate 20?
Well, it was on the Bankhead Highway. Remember?
Okay.
And it's equidistant to everywhere else.
So there's lots of different reasons, for Abilene's popularity. And just to work this in real quickly, I also did a presentation on songs about Wichita Falls, and I ended up coming up with enough for a slim volume, and it's called As Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita Falls in Song.
But what rhymes with Wichita Falls?
Yeah.
They're actually...
That's why
There's
it's so
a failing mall in Wichita Falls.
and
That's why it's so much skinnier than the Abilene book. But go ahead.
And we were talking about Blind Lemon Jefferson earlier. One of his early songs talks about going to Wichita Falls, and that particular line turned up in about 10 other blues songs over the years by other performers. So Wichita Falls kind of stayed alive just through Blind Lemon Jefferson. Bob Wills recorded the song similar to that, Merle Haggard as well. I put it on the back burner temporarily, but this past April in San Angelo at the West Texas Historical Association, I printed a paper, did a paper on songs about San Angelo.
I was wondering what's next.
And sure enough, there are over 30 songs that I've identified about San Angelo. So I've started working on another slim volume that will be dealing with songs about San Angelo.
But Abilene still whips them all.
Yeah.
Abilene is still the king, they say. And of course, I did an earlier project on songs about Amarillo. I could go back to that as well. Now we know there's dozens about Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. Those are obvious. So I'm kind of working the periphery, so to speak. But it's another example of the vibrancy of Texas music in general.
That there's that many songs. Are they in all different kinds of genres?
They are.
Is there rap music there?
Well, there's certainly rhythm and blues. I'm sure
That's not the question.
I'm sure if we did focused on songs about Houston, because some of the rap pioneers actually came from Houston.
Right, of course.
So I would expect there would be something about my hoe from Houston, or something along those lines.
Okay, what about?
I think that was the name of the song. Yeah. I remember that.
Well, there's actually some rappers from Abilene. Do you know any of the Abilene rappers?
I do not.
T. Moolah.
Ooh,
You don't know that one?
he might have done an Abilene song.
Yeah, I think that. Gosh, what was the other guy's name? He moved to Florida and became a rapper. So there's actually in the last generation, they're in their early 20s now.
Something money, wasn't it? Or something
No, that's T. Moolah now.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
What about Tejano music?
There
is Abilene in there too?
Yes, there is, and we do have 3 Tejano stations.
Yeah.
Although what's happened is with the immigration from Central America and so on, we're getting a lot. It's not conjunto music anymore, accordion driven, which was a form really distinct to Texas. There are two stories along those lines, how the accordion moved in to Tejano conjunto music.
And unfortunately, we're going to run out of time.
When we come back from the break, though, I want you to tell me about your book, The Roots of Texas Music. Yeah, because then you can tell me about...
That's where it all fit. The problem is we have less than 30 seconds left.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and we don't want to...
Maybe we've got some music to fade out with.
Oh, yeah, we'll get some bumpers in there.
But just real quickly, who's your favorite musician of all time? And you got 10 seconds.
I would have to divide it by category, but Ernest Tubb would be my favorite country musician.
Ernest Tubb. Okay, very good. Okay, we'll return with Joe Specht.
Welcome to State House Press, a nonprofit publisher of quality books. State House Press and the McWhinney Foundation Press are part of the Texas A&M University Press Consortium, which handles retail distribution for several small but distinguished publishers. Our entire list of offerings, with pictures, summaries, prices, and easy online ordering, is available in our section of the consortium website. State House Press is proud of its reputation for high standards of scholarship and readability. In addition to this, we at State House Press have recruited the talents of individuals such as Phil Collins on his book, The Alamo and Beyond. We release not only texana by contemporary authors, but reprints of classic accounts of Texas life and history otherwise inaccessible to the public. Our book list also incorporates the publications of the McWhinney Foundation Press, specializing in the history of the Old South and the Civil War. We strive with our titles to make history accessible to as many readers as possible. To accomplish this task, we have recruited some of America's leading historians, as well as bright new scholars. We believe firmly in narrative history, in telling a good story, and in telling it well, without losing sight of the people who've made history and the events that changed a nation.
For questions or business inquiries, please visit the Texas Book Consortium at www.tamupress.com.
This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com. This portion of the show is reserved for advertisements. If you are interested in filling this portion with ads for your business, please call 325-793-4686 or email director@tfhcc.com.
And we're back. Welcome to the professors for this next segment of our podcast. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier, and I asked you a question right before the break. This is our guest, Joe Specht. And
Texas music historian, retired librarian at McMurray University in Abilene, Texas.
That's his pedigree, but his output is The Roots of Texas Music. That's an interesting book. I'd like you to speak a little bit about that work.
Okay, now, I'm not the author, I'm the editor.
Okay.
And what happened, Lawrence Clayton, who, a legendary figure who...
No, Lawrence Clayton was a great guy.
He wrote about Texas. He was a mentor to all sorts of folks, and he taught at Hardin-Simmons, was Dean of Arts and Sciences there for many years. He developed Lou Gehrig's disease. Mm-hmm. He had already started this project, The Roots of Texas Music, with Texas A&M University Press, and I had written the essay on country music up to 1950. A&M did not want us to write about something that was so current that the history might actually change later.
Sure.
So our cutoff point was 1950. And so I wrote about Texas music up to 1950. When Lawrence, the disease began to progress, he realized that he was not going to be able to finish the project. He called me over to the 40 acres, and we visited, and he asked me to take over as co-editor, which I did. He had already lined up Jose Gutierrez, who wrote a chapter on Tejano Chicano music. Gutierrez was co-founder of Raza Unida. So we had some interesting an interesting slant on that. John Lightfoot wrote on the blues. As I said, I did country music. I asked Dave Oliphant to come in to write about Texas jazz. And Roger Wood, we asked to write about Zydeco music, which most people think of that as Louisiana.
Sure.
Well, what
Texas?
Roger Woods discovered is that Zydeco's birthplace was actually in Houston.
That would make sense.
And because it was the Creole Cajun culture moving in because of the petroleum industry
Oil
primarily,
business, sure.
and mixing it with rhythm and blues that was so prominent in Houston at the time. So this was our roots of Texas music. It was a real experience for me. I swore that I would never edit another book that involved other writers because there were deadlines that people did not meet.
Writers are the worst.
Yeah, there was plagiarism involved.
No.
Yes.
Really? There was plagiarism?
That I had to go back and figure out where certain footnotes needed to go because they were, and so on and so forth. I then found out I was responsible for the illustrations as well. And as Dr. Frazier would well know, some institutions or people who have photographs want to charge you to use them.
Sometimes a lot.
And so I had to look for photographs that were free. I was not going to invest my own money. Anyway, it was a very interesting project.
Not my money.
The person that indexed the book, we paid him money, and it turned out it was a horrible index that I had to go back and re-index myself and so on. But The Roots of Texas Music is still in print.
Yeah.
2003 was when it hit the store, and it's in its third printing. So it turned out to be a worthy project. It sort of put my name on the map. I've read 5 different manuscripts for A&M. Since then, there's a John and Robin Dixon series in Texas Music that A&M publishes, and I'm currently actually reading a book on Ray Wiley Hubbard.
Oh, wow.
Who's most famous perhaps for his song "Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother."
Do you know that song?
I don't know.
You
this
didn't
song.
hum that when you were growing up?
I grew up in Southern California.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, this just never came up.
It
And
was
I
issued
didn't
to
know
us
anything
growing up.
about country music.
Well,
or
this
Texas
is really
music until
kind of an in-between.
Urban
It's
Cowboy.
Americana. They would call it Americana now. Ray Wiley also wrote "Screw You, We're from Texas." And that's another one of his anthems.
Well, let me just ask you, where do these clever titles come from? I mean, they seem to be, especially with country music and sort of more grassroots kind of music. Is that
Probably
a fair
from
thing to
behind
say?
chicken wire, if I had to guess.
Why is that?
I think that rhythm and blues music, and country music, the music of the people, I think it lends itself to, there's no pretensions, or there weren't for many decades of pretensions about this being art.
Or high art, anyway.
And so on. Jazz has always aspired since the 50s anyway. It is American music. There's no doubt about that. But it's considered to be an art form now. And you're not going to name one of your compositions, I gave her the ring, she gave me the finger. That sort of thing. That's one of my favorite country songs, for example.
Yeah.
But I don't think country music is actually the titles are not holding up like they used to.
Yeah, not anymore.
Is it getting more refined? It's more accepted now.
Well, I think we've moved away from the folk, and what we have now, we have bro country.
Bro country. Yeah.
These folks are more at home on a beach in Miami.
Yeah.
Than they are.
Well, even Willie Nelson, you said, is recording from Maui, so.
Yeah.
Is he losing his roots?
No, Willie's not going to lose his roots. His latest album, he's actually talking about the afterlife again. One of my projects is called The Gospel According to Willie, and you would be amazed about the biblical, the Buddhist, all sorts of things that come into his music. Still is still moving to me. That was the name of one of his songs. That's a philosophical concept. So there's a whole probably a whole book, but certainly a nice meaty article. And this new album that came out has some great thought songs like that relate. Willie's 85. He's got to think about the
Yeah,
trail.
he's got to be thinking about
The
something.
trail winding down, but he is Texas music to many people, and rightly so. This new exhibit that's at the Country Music Hall of Fame, they have a pair of Willie Nelson's tennis shoes. That's on display.
Wow.
Because when he moved back to Texas after his home burned in 1969, he started wearing tennis shoes. He didn't need to wear boots anymore. He was going to be comfortable.
Yeah.
He was going to be himself. And that kind of personifies Texas music as well. Those musicians are their own people.
We're growing up.
Growing up what?
Is that what it is? We're growing up. We don't need to just be dependent like on the boots. We can do what we want to do.
Well, and I think that's what Texans have done from the beginning.
Right.
In other words, boots. Roy Acuff wasn't wearing boots. He was the king of the Grand Ole Opry in the 30s and 40s. But it was Tex Ritter, Bob Wills, Tommy Duncan. Those guys were wearing boots. Gene Autry brought the whole Western garb into country music as well through his movies and that sort of thing.
Okay, we're unfortunately going to have to stop. We're
Well,
running
first
out of
installment,
time.
yeah.
Yes, you will be back, we hope, okay?
Be happy to come back.
Thank you so much, Joe Specht. We really appreciate it. And
Everybody, class dismissed.